Education in the Flatter World. As you can see, that's number one in our top 10. It's a title of our program. It's a takeoff on the bestseller by Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat. In his book, Friedman talks a lot about India and China and the challenge we have in maintaining the competitive edge in math and science and technology. It's a pretty technical, eye-opening book. I know many of you have read it. It's been talked about a lot lately. But just to distill that down, there was a quote from the book that I like that really kind of puts in perspective for those of us in the P16 work. Friedman says, "When I was growing up, my parents told me, 'Finish your dinner. People in China and India are starving.' Today, I tell my daughters, 'Finish your homework. People in India and China are starving for your job.'" That's succinct, but it puts it in perspective for us. We were joking a little bit earlier that the president even mentioned this last night. I think he mentioned that people should come to the Georgia Partnership meeting this morning. But he was certainly talking about the national crisis in math and science. But there are a lot of other articles and reports that have framed this for us. Those of you that have participated in the last year and a half in our economics of education, if we go across the state, we too have talked about education is economic development. But just a couple of the other reports in addition to the one I mentioned a few minutes ago from the Business Roundtable. Keeping America Competitive, 5 strategies to improve math and science education by the Education Commission of the States. Roadmap for National Security, Imperative for Change by the U.S. Commission on National Security. Not just the business and education community, but by the Commission on National Security. Losing the Competitive Edge by AEA. Mike Levin is here today from the American Electronics Association. Rising Above the Gathering Storm, Energizing and Employing America for a Brighter Economic Future, recently published by the National Academies. We have a crisis looming in our country. Lack of achievement in our high schools in math and science, and a lack of graduates in math, science, and technology coming out of our colleges and universities. So today we offer for you then the perspective. Susan Traman will give you the perspective nationally. Then Eloise Barron, Dr. Barron, will give you the perspective from the Department of Education, what's happening in Georgia. And Dr. Jan Kettlewell will give you the perspective from the Board of Regents, including a look at the new PRISM program and the campaign that started there. Then Deirdre Johnson will come up and give a brief gap analysis of what we hear is happening nationally and should happen locally, what is happening locally, and the gap in between that. And then we'll have opportunities for your question and answer. And now I ask Susan Traman to kick it off for us. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Steve. We'll just take a second to adjust the PowerPoint, but I wanted to mention I was in China in September, and I was part of a delegation of 20 business and education leaders looking at math and science programs in China. We met with people from the Ministry of Education, we met with business people and educators. Everywhere we went, Beijing, Shanghai, even a rural province, people referred to famous American author Thomas Friedman, World is Flat. The book had already been translated into Chinese. It seems that there's electricity in the air. Now, that's not a very scientific term, I know, but the State of the Union last night, the initiatives going on in Georgia and across the country, bubbling up from the grassroots as well as from our top leaders, makes it seem that we are on the verge of doing something really important. Now, the business community has been talking about this for a long time, and raising the issue with national leaders. As Steve said, Business Roundtable and 14 other business organizations issued the report, Tapping America's Potential, that's in your materials. And the CEO said, look, we're tired of rhetoric. Let's set a very specific, measurable goal that we can hold ourselves and our country accountable for. And so the goal is, within 10 years, to double the number of graduates with bachelor's degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Some folks in the education community and science community refer to this as STEM. Legislators and others sort of scratch their heads when we say STEM and confuse it with stem cell research and other kind of controversial things. So, but I may, just because we are under time constraints this morning, occasionally use the word STEM. And the call to action is for business leaders, government leaders, educators, everyone, to build the momentum to achieve that goal over the next 10 years. Now, how do I go back? Okay. What the CEO said is they belong to lots of different industry groups, and they serve on many commissions, and all of those groups were issuing reports on this problem. Steve went back and mentioned a few. They said, look, the last thing the CEOs at the Business Roundtable need to do is to put out another report. They charged the staff with taking all the reports, about 15 that had gotten some national attention, creating a matrix to identify where was their consensus, where did everyone agree. So instead of putting out another report, another analysis, let's say, here are things everyone agrees on. Let's get the business community on one page so that we can speak with one voice. And you see here the alphabet soup of business groups in Washington. Some of them are also in Georgia, that all agreed to sign on to this statement. And as Steve said, 5 recommendations bubbled up from all of the ones in the report. You can see them here. And essentially, they describe a need to, wherever you start in the system, recognize that to get to the goal where we need to be competitive as a nation, we need to motivate young people to major in these fields and enter the careers. We need to upgrade K-12 teaching in these fields. No one's going to be motivated to go into them if they had a terrible experience or were turned off to these subjects in their schooling. In fact, I was at a meeting recently where a high-level person from one of our companies, the chief technology officer, said that he had talked to several of his colleagues from different Fortune 200 companies who all had a background in chemistry. And they all had 2 things in common. One was they had had a chemistry set when they were a kid. And the second was a high school chemistry teacher who really inspired them to go on in college. The next piece of this interactive set of recommendations is that while we are improving the pipeline of talent in the U.S., we still have to keep our doors open to the best and brightest foreign students to come to the U.S. to study for advanced degrees and to stay to work in the United States. In the post-9/11 environment, there have been visa problems. Some of those visa problems have been resolved, but the U.S. is still perceived to be less welcoming than other countries who have stepped up to seek out the talent from around the world. And we don't make it easy for people to get green cards to stay to work in the United States. So it takes at least 17 years to create an engineer. 13 in K-12 plus 4 in higher education. We have a problem right now, so we need to make sure we are welcoming and open to foreign talent. And then we also need to increase federal investment in basic research. And the State of the Union last night, the President's budget is going to reflect this. For the small group of people, very important people, who are going on to get PhDs, the people who are going to get the patents, the people who are going to do the breakthrough research that may not pay off for 15 years, they need funding to do research for their postdoctoral degrees. When that money dries up, they go into other fields. So just as an example, when the NIH budget doubled, they have not had a problem attracting people into the life sciences. The physical sciences have not seen that kind of increase. In fact, it's been flat or going down. And so if we're going to have the kind of investments that lead to things like the internet, we have to make those investments in the physical sciences. However, Washington, like Georgia, like every other state, has separate silos that lobby on these issues. And I apologize for those of you in the pre-K community. There should be a pre-K silo on here. And what happens is that everybody has to report to their membership group, to their constituency, that they got their dollar, that they got their policy passed or into a piece of legislation. This effort in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics requires us all to come together to understand the interaction between each piece of the agenda and to talk about it as one set of policy proposals instead of in our different silos. I'm sure some of you have heard the expression that collaboration is an unnatural act between non-consenting adults. However, to be savvy politically, we're going to have to break down these silos to move forward. Now, the thing that's driving this the most is the fierce competition for talent. This is a photo from a mathematics class I visited in Shanghai. There are 67 students in this 10th grade class. Someone asked me, do they all smile all the time? No, they knew there was a camera in the room. But what we see in China is a determination, a sense that opportunity depends on performing at a very high level in mathematics and science. They have a different resource trade-off than we do in this country. They put the resources into teacher quality, and they have a very large class size. So teachers teach fewer classes a day, spend a lot of time in professional development and working with master teachers, but class sizes are extremely large. Now, I wanted to show you a couple of numbers to illustrate the challenge we face on talent. For many years, when the international math and science test results would come out, the U.S. wouldn't do very well. Singapore would always be on top. But that didn't pose a serious problem to U.S. competitiveness because Singapore is about the size of Chicago. So even though we as a nation performed much worse than Singapore, in terms of the actual number of people, we still had more people, the quantity of people performing at a high level than Singapore. However, in this changing world, China has more people under the age of 18 than the entire population of the United States. So even if they succeed with only a small fraction of their population, they can outdo us very rapidly. And from our visit in China, what we saw is that they have made a commitment to their best and brightest. That's where their initial focus was. But now they want to have a much more equitable education system. When they talk about closing the gap, they're not talking about closing the gap between ethnic and racial groups. It's closing the gap between urban and rural. They have a very sophisticated plan over the next 10 years to reach out to those rural areas, largely using technology. They have an incentive plan that if you want to be a principal in one of the schools that serves these top-flying math and science students, these high performers, you have to do your time out in a rural school somewhere else in China. And one thing that's very striking about China, when they set goals, they're not rhetorical. You know, I was at the National Governors Association when we set a goal to be first in the world in math and science by the year 2000. In the U.S., politicians set goals that are rhetorical. In China, they mean it. And one of the things that has CEOs quite worried, even though they're part of helping China, is that China is determined to have 100 world-class universities at the level of MIT over the next 15 years. They not only want to top us in K-12 education, but they want to attract the best and brightest scientists from around the world and invest in research. Now, one of the things we're facing, but I'm so encouraged now because of the State of the Union, what you're doing, what's happening around the country, is how to communicate the crisis. Now, I don't want to embarrass anyone in the room, but how many people actually remember Sputnik? Raise your hand. I think it's about half the people here. I admit I was 6 years old. I have a vague recollection. Most young people have no clue when you talk about Sputnik. When people say that they got into science and engineering because of the space race, that they were energized and excited, they felt like they were part of something larger than themselves, young people scratch their heads and say, Sputnik, I think I read about it in my history book. So we need to find a new way to communicate with young people, to get them excited. One other brief anecdote about China. We met with many students, and of course, these are just anecdotal. You know, they put their best kids in front of us. By the way, they all speak very good English. And so I asked a number of the 15-year-olds, why do you work so hard in math and science? Why do you take all these tough courses? And they don't have a sequence of biology, chemistry, physics. Every year they take biology, chemistry, and physics, each year of high school. So they're working very hard. And they said there are 3 reasons they work hard. And this was repeated in different areas in China. To honor my family. Well, I know my 16-year-old doesn't say that. The second reason is to make money. Well, U.S. teenagers say that. And the third reason was to give back to my country. And we don't hear young people saying that today. So one of the things that was commented on, I think, by Phil in the discussion last night about freeing the U.S. from the addiction on energy, on oil, a lot of kids today have grown up, for want of a better word, green. You know, they're tuned into the environment. And it may be that the environmental challenges, the challenge of new sources of energy, of freedom from Mideast oil, maybe that could energize a new generation in the way that space was for a previous generation. But we know we've got a communications issue here. So we commissioned some research from Democratic pollster Peter Hart and a Republican pollster, David Winston. We did focus groups, we did surveys of opinion leaders and American voters, and we wanted to know, do people understand that there's a problem? Are they aware of the relationship between math, science, engineering, U.S. innovation, and competitiveness? And then do they understand that there are 3 prongs to the solution that are mentioned in the Tapping America's Potential report, and that is increasing the pipeline at home, keeping our doors open to foreign talent, and bolstering funding for basic research. I want to share with you some of the findings. both opinion leaders and voters said that today the U.S. is the strongest economic power in the world. However, when they look to the future, they see China on top, China as number one, and the U.S. falling to number two. Our pollsters tell us that this is the first time they've seen that. 10 years ago, approximately 10 years ago, when voters were asked, who's the strongest today, they said the U.S., and then projecting just 10 years out, they still thought it would be the U.S. But look, it's very interesting. They thought Japan would be number two, and look where China was. So just over, the 9 years since, look at what's happened in terms of China's actual rise in terms of GDP, but also the perception of what's going to happen. Now, when we ask Americans about whether high schools are preparing young people for the workforce and for college, and this is a question that the Education Testing Service has asked, that Achieve has asked, we repeated it again, you see that both opinion leaders, a majority of opinion leaders and a majority of the public do not think high schools are doing a good job. And in the subgroups, you may not be able to see this, but Hispanics in particular, 70% say not doing a good job. So there's a lack of confidence in our education system being able to meet this challenge. We then asked some questions about the recommendations in the report, the Tapping America's Potential report, which, by the way, is almost a synopsis of the recommendations in the report that came out from the National Academies. The National Academies report was just more detailed and thicker. This was meant to be a short and punchy statement. But basically, when we said, in looking at the challenge of the global economy and the need to significantly increase America's capabilities in science, technology, engineering, and math, how would people compare this with other challenges? And what you see here is people understand the problem. Among opinion leaders, a third actually thought this was the most important problem. But clearly people were saying this needs to rise to the top of the national agenda, and the fact that the president included it last night in the State of the Union says that he recognizes that, and we're hearing it from both sides across the aisle in Congress. We then asked people to rank the recommendations. We had 5, and we said all are essential. But, in polling, you frequently force people to make one choice. So it's difficult because people don't want to make one choice, but when forced to, you can see that the first two, the education-related ones, clearly rise to the top. Now, this is troubling. People understand the problem. They feel education is the most important way to get there. But when you ask both parents and other adults whether they would try to persuade a child, either their own child or a child they know, to enter these careers, take a look at this. Only 5% of parents say that they would. And overwhelmingly, parents say they would allow the child to pursue whatever career path he or she feels suits them best. Now, this is troubling, but one of the things we need to always do is to think about the best way to approach something in the context of American culture. In focus groups, what parents say is, we want our children to find something that makes them happy. They say that ahead of that makes them comfortable and able to move out of the house. And I I need to do a study on this, but I think we may be the only nation in the world that talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That may be in our DNA. Some of what parents may be thinking is a young person today is going to have many jobs. They'll probably work longer. There won't be the same idea of a retirement age at 62 or 65. So they need to find something where going to work every day is rewarding. However, I can tell you that in China, they are not worrying about whether their kids are happy. They're telling their kids, you need to, I see some nods over here, you need to major in these fields. These are the ones that are important for your future. So we have a big, big difference in cultures, and we're going to have to figure out in communicating our messages what to do about that. We tested some messages, and this wasn't, once again, about your own child. This was just messages in general. And people had to say, what's the single most concerning trend? K-12 performance compared to other countries is the one that bubbled up. I was a little bit surprised because I had seen some other public opinion research in the 80s and early 90s, and international comparisons were a real turnoff. People just resisted looking at them. There seems to be much more receptivity and concern about the international comparisons. There are two messages that were very convincing. The one that was the most convincing had to do with virtually every student taking a rigorous core curriculum, regardless of what career path they're going to enter. Basically, we have to ensure that the education system teaches our children skills they need to compete in the global economy, and putting in the number of years they need to take in an academic core. And then the second one closely tied economic competitiveness with education, that we can't rely on people from other countries to meet our country's needs. We have to develop a generation of homegrown workers. And I wanted to mention a story that I saw this morning in the Wall Street Journal. By the way, when I was in education, I taught 7th grade social studies for 3 years. I never read the Wall Street Journal. And I'm guessing most educators don't read it. It is such a fabulous source of information, the news section in particular. You may have many differences in the editorial pages. But there's a story in this morning's Wall Street Journal about, I hope I don't mispronounce it, Osceola, Arkansas. And the gist of the story is that as the auto industry is letting people go in Detroit, European and Asian auto companies and suppliers are opening up in the South. And what they're looking for, even more than tax incentives, is an educated workforce. And this story about Osceola talks about how they were able to attract Toyota by making a real commitment to upgrading the education there. The particular strategy they used was a charter school. I don't think it's necessarily that it has to be a charter school, but it was that commitment. And the article goes on to talk about the fact that the kind of worker, the caliber worker they're looking for isn't someone who can just push buttons. The person has to be able to think. The person has to have succeeded in mathematics. The person has to be able to read and problem solve. So one thing I think is very important as we move forward on this issue, we're not just talking about scientists and engineers. We're talking about a knowledge and skill set that will prepare young people for virtually any career that they go into. So I'm not always optimistic. But I really think that there's potential now for real change. Those of you who have been at this for a long time, I'm sure sometimes feel, report after report comes out. What's different now? And, we've had The World is Flat, Tom Friedman's book, and that got this out to the lay public. I mean, it's been on the bestseller list for so many weeks, and even if people haven't read it, they grasp this notion the world is flat. The report from the National Academies had a real impression on the administration because it was business, academics, Nobel laureates, all singing from the same page. And the fact that we were able to get the AEAs of the world, the NAMs, the Business Roundtable, all the business groups, this is like herding cats, on the same page. And we have K-12 educators, higher educators, all saying we want to be part of the coalition. So I think there's real momentum for change, and it's all going to come down to leadership. Thank you.
And I think we're ready for change in Georgia. Susan, thank you so much. Steve mentioned that we are looking at students who are not achieving at the level that we think is necessary. We call this our bleeding map in Georgia. It's actually the 2005 results of the high school graduation test in science. That is not the first year that we have had a map that looks like a bleeding map. This means that of all the systems that are in red, all of the schools in some of the systems and over half of the schools in every system up there in red had less than 70% of their students pass the high school test in science the first time they took the test. Math is not as dismal, but we know that our math students are not performing where we would like to see them perform as well. Many of you in this room know that for the last 3 years, we have been on a journey not to revise the curriculum in Georgia, but to rewrite it. And over the next few minutes, I would like to talk about the development of the Georgia Performance Standards, some of the recognitions and alignments that we have made with the standards, and what we have done in the area of training and resources that school systems and teachers are getting now that they've never had in the past. Susan talked about upgrading K-12, and we think that with the new standards and with the support that we've had from our superintendent and the State Board of Education to approve the standards, and with the support we're getting from good teachers across the state to implement the standards, we will in fact improve and upgrade K-12. In looking at the goals of the new curriculum, Susan, I heard you say a viable curriculum. We too believe, just as Marzano talked about, that it is a viable curriculum that will make a difference in student achievement. Because with the viable curriculum, we can set clear and high expectations for all of our students, especially looking at core courses that all students should have, regardless of whether they're going to college, university, other post-secondary institutions, or to the workforce. Also, another goal for the standards is to align to national level standards. And we have done that with the standards that we have written and the board has approved. Also, to increase rigor and depth of understanding and consistency of the standards. The curriculum in place prior to the Georgia Performance Standards was a mile wide and an inch deep, one of our critics who did an evaluation said. And we know that our teachers tried hard to cover everything they possibly could, but trying to cover everything did not give them time enough to teach in depth. And I think that's the piece that we realized was missing. We also realized that our old curriculum was not guiding teaching and learning, so that teachers weren't really sure what to teach. There was so much in the curriculum that they had to pick and choose, and in many cases they let the assessment determine what part they actually taught. And then our goal is to align assessments and our accountability to the curriculum. In looking at the process, many of you in this room had a part in helping us with developing the standards in the state, because we had advisory boards for each of the 4 content areas, as well the math and science. Many of you in here were on those 2 committees. The advisory boards were made up of the general public, educators, teachers, many people from business, different walks of business, and they helped give us direction as to what standards we should look at and how we should begin to approach the whole notion of writing performance standards or borrowing and adapting from other places. Then we had writing teams that actually looked at curricula from other states and nations, and who sat down and went through the process of deciding what is right for Georgia. Then after developing the curriculum, we had precision review teams that looked for correctness, accurateness, clear, sequenced are the standards, what should be appropriate for the different grade levels and in different courses. And all of these standards were posted on our website for at least 90 days because we wanted input from everyone. And believe me, we got thousands and thousands of responses from the public about the curriculum, and made modifications in many places as a result of that. We reviewed the curriculum from other states and nations, as I've said earlier, and we actually looked to another nation in the area of mathematics. We looked to Japan. And much of our math curriculum is based on Japanese standards. We identified models of high student achievement, looking at states where students are competitive and do well on different assessments. And then we began to develop the performance standards after the input from the outside, and our state board approved the standards in math and science. Mathematics was approved, the high school math, in May of this past year. Looking at some of the subject changes in math and science, not only is the mathematics related to or looks a lot like the Japanese standards, we paid close attention to what the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics were advocating for mathematics. And we have taken the bold steps of increasing that rigor at the middle school in that Algebra 1 and most of what we know of as the high school geometry course are now part of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum. And that enables our students to enter the high school courses, the integrated math courses at the high school, and for even the pathway that requires the least math, they will have accomplished at least Algebra 2 by the time they graduate. In the area of science, we align the curriculum nationally with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the benchmarks for scientific literacy, and we also looked at the science standards for the national science standards. And by the way, project managers for benchmarks signed off, were pleased with the standards that Georgia produced in the area of science. In mathematics, we have written courses for core mathematics, and those courses, while they're not as rigorous as the mathematics courses and the accelerated math, we knew that when we first implemented this more rigorous curriculum in the high school, that there would be students that were not quite ready to go into the math 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have the variable of time with core math 1, 2, 3, 4, but by the time those students finish core math 4, they are at the level of most students with math 2, which exceeds algebra, gets into statistics, and into some calculus. And then our accelerated math 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where we get into the advanced placement, calculus, statistics, and the higher level mathematics courses. In science, we're looking at streamlining some of the courses, the core courses. We will continue to have many electives in science, but we're looking specifically at biology, physical science, chemistry, physics, environmental science, human anatomy, physiology, and earth systems as being the 7 core courses. We're in the process of recommending that our high school graduation requirements be revised for the 08 school year, students entering the 9th grade in 08. And our recommendation, with input already from many people, and we will continue to seek input, but we're looking at requiring all students to take biology and then have a different pathway, one pathway where students would take biology, physical science, and one of the other 5 sciences that I just mentioned, or the pathway of taking the biology, physics, and chemistry. And that would focus our students on the same core that Susan mentioned earlier, so that we could assure that all students had the core courses and then had the option of selecting many other electives. In looking at the implementation timeline, we had to look at how could we phase in the curriculum so that students could be prepared for the next level. We decided that since the middle school mathematics had changed so drastically, we would implement the 6th grade math this year. As we speak, students are being taught the new GPS in 6th grade mathematics. We also implemented 6th and 7th grade science and the high school science this year. But you can look from our phase-in plan that we decided to go from the 6th grade, add the 7th grade, and start to pick up the elementary grades next year, K2. Phase 3, we'll add the 8th grade, and we will actually not teach the new integrated mathematics until the fall of 08 for the 9-12. And that is when we need to have a new high school graduation requirement in place. I want you to be aware of some recognitions that we have received. I wasn't sure where to put Board of Regents on here because they've been holding our hand throughout the whole process. I put them here because not only did they help us to develop the standards in math and science, but they also were with us at Georgia Tech, I don't know how many nights and weekends, helping us with the precision review, especially of the mathematics, and with a lot of the rewrite. But also, the academic committees of the Board of Regents sent letters of support of the math and science. And we were pleased to have the backing of that group of individuals. Because Jen will talk in a few minutes about the efforts that we're doing with another collaborative, but we know that in upgrading and getting the rigor in our K-12 math and science, we have to know what those students will be doing when they finish high school. So being able to talk with the folks from Board of Regents has really helped us. Then the Thomas B. Fordham Foundation. For those of you who remember back about, I think, 2000, we had a report from Fordham, and at the time, mathematics received a B, and science received an F. And we're pleased to announce that that has changed. We have only had feedback on the K-8 mathematics, but Fordham placed the K-8 6th in the nation and placed us on the honor roll for math. And in the area of science, K-12 They ranked us 12th in the nation and put us on the honor roll and said that we were one of the most improved states. So we were pleased with that as well. And a project that I want to just mention, Jan and I have worked closely on, and it's something that we've really just begun. But Susan talked a lot about that connection between having the core in the high school mean something for students regardless of whether they're entering the workplace or they're going to university or to one of the technical schools. And a project, the American Diploma project, is something that we are working on with Achieve now. Jan and I are both on the state committee to do that. And we have already had the side-by-side done for our grades 6 through 12 in mathematics. And Jan, the word that was used, I believe, in Washington the last time we were there is that we had an incredible match with the American Diploma Project Standards and the Georgia Standards 612. As a matter of fact, Jan can tell you that many of the people from other states were saying, "How did you do that in Georgia?" And that was really a good feeling to have those questions asked of us. That project helps us to determine what courses in high school show that a student is ready for college, university, or the workplace. And we're also looking at the possibility of having a common high school assessment that colleges and universities would accept as placement there. Then the state assessments, it's like in the past we have had backloading according to Fenwick English. We had these tests built and then we decided what to teach. Now it's the reverse. We have what we believe students should know and be able to do, and we have built tests to see if they do in fact know what we are teaching them. So all of the state assessments have been revised or are being revised, and the areas that are being taught this year in math and science are being assessed this year using assessments based on the GPS. Just briefly, I know I'm running out of time, I want to mention the efforts that we have made in training. This is the first time that the State Department of Education has ever launched a massive professional learning initiative around the state curriculum. And we have spent many days last year and this year training some 2,500 trainers to go back and train every classroom teacher statewide that will be implementing the standards. We have also done work with Board of Regents again in having over 600 university staff members learn more about the standards. And we have done new teacher training through PRISM, working with PRISM, an area that Jan will be speaking on in just a few minutes, where we have trained those teachers 5 days about the standards. Then school administrators, we have trained over 1,200 with content-specific training there. Again, briefly, but the resources have been available to systems. We've given them participant guides and facilitator guides of all the work that we've done training the trainers. We have also started a new website, the georgiastandards.org, where we are posting the standards, elements defining the standards, tasks, student work, and commentary. We have been able to provide every school with every middle school or elementary school with the 6th grade manipulatives to use in the math classroom, and also a set of calculators for every school. And we've provided K-8 brochures talking about the standards and the assessments that go with the standards to take home to parents. And I've mentioned the human resources, not only the content-specific training, we've also done work with RESAs and directly with local systems, and we have 16 science implementation specialists that we are putting in the schools that need most help in the area of science. And Jan will talk about the collaboration with the PRISM, and we're also working closely with the Math Science Partnership and other informal agencies to help us implement the standards and to make sure that we do lead the nation in improving student achievement. Jan?
It's a statewide initiative. The Georgia Department of Education and the Board of Regents are the two state partners, and we're really drilling down in 4 regions of the state. There's a map in there, and you can see the school districts and colleges and universities that are involved. But in general, if you sort of visualize a map of Georgia, one of our regions is in the metro area, one is up in the surrounding Athens, one is down around Savannah, and one is around Statesboro. So we have about 270,000 K-12 students we're working with, and 7 colleges and universities, 15 school districts, 275 schools. And the kinds of recommendations that Susan was talking about, we're drilling down in those 4 regions to learn everything we can about practice through some of the generalizable research we're doing and some things we're learning about policy. And as we work in those 4 regions, then we want to ramp this up statewide. Now, one of those strategies that Susan referenced is really what I want to focus on today. And it's called our Public Awareness Campaign. We did a good bit of market research which told us who were the key influence points to get at the kind of audience that Susan was talking about. And then secondly, what's the kind of messaging we need to do? And so we actually launched our Public Awareness Campaign just a couple of weeks ago, January 23rd. And the person in our office, the University System Office, that directs the Public Awareness Campaign for PRISM is Rosalind Barnes, and I want to turn it over to her so she can have the time to talk about it.
Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everyone. We're going to have to go real fast since we got a lot to cover, but you can notice in your packet you have everything I'm going to show you. And we're really excited about this. PRISM, the Partnership for Reform in Science and Mathematics, the 9th strategy is the Public Awareness Campaign to get more students to take more math and science courses, especially those with greater rigor. And of course, we're glad that Susan kind of introduced this because, of course, we think about it at a national level. Now we're looking at the state level, and now we're going to act locally. The PRISM campaign is going on in 4 regions throughout the state: the Savannah area, the Statesboro area, the Athens area, and the metropolitan Atlanta area. And so we just want to kind of give you some sense of what we're hoping to do with the campaign. First thing we want to do is get some shifts in attitudes. We really want students to want to take math and science courses, to tackle those math and science courses. And we want to change their behavior in taking those, especially those with the higher level ones. The situation that Georgia is facing, and of course, Jan explained that we have done extensive market research directly with Georgia students and Georgia parents. First, math and science are inextricably linked because we're in a technology-driven world. And we need to make sure that's really well known and that we're all thinking on the same page. The students do themselves a disservice by not being savvy in math and science. The parents know that it's not okay to be illiterate, to not be able to read and to write. But parents are really not focusing on how important it is that their students and their children are excelling in math and science. And today, math and science are part of everyday life. And we want to make sure that that's something that's a message that you can't walk out the door without bumping into math or science. Or even in your own home, you're seeing the same thing. And that, of course, to be successful in a career and be happy in your career, you're going to need math and science. And some of the goals of the campaign is to make sure that parents are more involved in their children's learning, not just from reading and social sciences, the arts, but also in the math and science area. And we're finding, the research shows that a lot of parents are very afraid of those subject areas. That's why they're not pushing their children to do well. So we are addressing that in the campaign as well. We want students to start to tackle and take tougher courses, to want to take tougher courses and to understand why they need to take tougher courses. And we want them to tackle math and science the way they tackle skateboards, rap music, video games, sports. We really want them to tackle it that same way with the same rigor. The message that we know we need to say to students is you can be cool and still be good at science and mathematics. You can be happy and still be good at math and science. And even if you're not going to college, if you don't think right now that you're going to college, you still need a strong foundation in math and science in order to be successful in whatever it is you're doing. If you're going to do rap music, you got to understand how to use all those technology. It's really essential to do well. And in today's technology-driven economy, it's a handicap not to do well in those two subjects. And then with a college education, obviously coming from the university system and working with the Georgia Department of Education, we know that it's still important for our children, Georgia's children, need to go to college. Whether it's a 2-year or 4-year institution, they need to go to college. And if you do earn a college degree, you're going to make somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 million more than those without degrees. Some of our concerns, the PRISM project concerns, that students aren't really interested in tackling anything that they don't think is relevant or useful to them. So we've got to think about ways to make sure that math and science is relevant to everyday life. And then we're especially worried as a group that rural students in the southern part of Georgia, that they are having some access and transportation issues to places that can expose them to math and science outside of their school. And that if Georgia students don't do well, the entire state will suffer. And we know we are already at that point. For us, the advertising is geared toward some core markets. Obviously, the general public, movers and shakers like yourselves here, educators from P-12 as well as higher ed, parents, P-12 students, and then we knew if we could reach the middle school student and parents from disadvantaged backgrounds in rural Georgia, we've hit the mark and we've made a difference. Some of the complications we faced was, do we call it PRISM? Whenever I call someone and say, hey, I'm from PRISM, they go, prison? So we knew we couldn't do that. And then we had to craft a message that would be fast and easy to understand, that it would get the point across, and that no matter what, it would be empowering. So now, some of the observations we made. First of all, broccoli isn't chocolate. Math and science is tough. We know it is. And so it's not something cute. We need to make sure that we address it in a way that says, this is a serious subject, it's a serious matter, and we're serious about it. Chores are not fun. And then math and science does not rock. So we did understand that. And then we wanted to make sure we told the truth, we were simple, and we were positive. So drum roll. She's not afraid of spiders, snakes, or science, especially not science. Why? Because she got interested in it early. Now she'll keep taking math and science courses, which will give her far more opportunities later on. For tips on keeping your kid on track, go to mathsciencesuccess.org. And of course, our moniker here, math plus science equals success. And these are, if you're sitting in a bus shelter waiting for the bus, you will see this ad here. Kids who get into chemistry get into college. And kids who get into college earn an additional $500,000 or more during their working career than those without a degree. For tips on getting your kid fired up about math and science, visit our website. Again, another bus shelter ad. And we're very excited about this. This is the campaign logo, Math plus Science equals success. Last week, Secretary Spellings was in town, and we had a chance to talk with her, and we actually gave her one of these cool little patches that I am wearing. I've got several people wearing these patches, and she was so excited. She said, this is what we need. And this is, of course, is a National Science Foundation grant, so we made sure she understood, hey, the National Science Foundation is the one that's really supporting this, but we know this is a message that can get out, and Georgia is leading the nation in trying to make sure this message is very clear. So I'm hoping that this will be a Got Milk campaign, and so hopefully you'll start seeing this. And you too should run around and say, math plus science equals success, but this is ours. We are trademarking it. We're working on trademarking it right now because every time I've shown it to anyone, people have gotten so excited about it. So we are just excited ourselves. And I'm just going to run through. We've got a television spot, 2 spots that we're showing. I don't know if has anybody had a chance to see those spots? Anybody seen a Math plus Science spot? Well, I'm going to show them to you today. Just quickly, we got a little technical thing we have to do here. I've got 2, so I'm going to show you both of them. We'll just have to look at it this way. It'll be small, but we'll still see it. It's they were supposed to have it so that it's not. I got it. It's on as high as it can go. They didn't switch it. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll show this in just a little bit. A technical person walked out.
Take advantage of the transition. There's a point that I wanted to make.
Go ahead, make it. Okay. And you can see in your packets, we have other bus shelters ads here. If no one ever discovers that I'm good at science, and then again, we're still just talking to parents about thinking about the fact that if their children do have propensities to do well in math and science, they need to help them to discover that. Here, expect more from me, you won't be disappointed. And this is something we need to say to parents. Even though you may not have done well in math and science, it's okay. I need to do more. I can do better. And then we hope to eventually have some newspaper ads where we would also do it in Spanish. We have an advertorial that's coming out on the Georgia Trend this month, February. And Georgia's future is this simple. And this is geared toward talking to businesses about helping us to really advance this campaign beyond just the 4 areas where we are right now. We have parent guides that are online right now, and we are going to provide these small pocket guides to parents throughout the PRISM regions that will talk to them about what you can do from K through 5, the middle grades, and high school to make sure your children are doing well and enhance their skill and abilities in math and science. Then we have billboards throughout the state. These are, and I have 5 or 6 I'm going to show you here. Multiply her opportunities. And this, people should be able to see them no matter how far they are. Math plus science equals success. What every child needs to know. If he can do equations, he can do anything. Kids who get science get great jobs. One formula can change your future. Help your kid go places in life. And I've seen a lot of these already throughout the state. And I'm hoping if you see them, let us know. We're excited about this. And kids who get math get great jobs. Right now, all of the PRISM schools have banners. Our school gets it. And the Atlanta Public School Systems are actually our partner in PRISM, so you should see these banners there. We have posters for students who cares about math and science, and then more people than you think in some pretty cool careers, and it's listing out several careers that require math and or science skills. Then we have one poster for math and one poster for science, and these are available online on at the website, so students can download them or teachers can download them and print them and post them places. And we also have the math and science poster available for students to receive, and DOE is going to help us to distribute these throughout the entire state of Georgia. The mathsciencesuccess.org website includes information for students and for parents, and we hope to start putting some things on here for the community to get involved and to help us with our efforts. We are also looking to create some partnerships with businesses to help us to advance this, the campaign itself, and to help businesses to also show how they are interested in math and science. We have an idea on doing some bus graphics within the different regions. Here is, at Georgia Power, we know what it takes to keep Georgia running. Math plus science equals success. And we have the opportunity to actually look at doing some of these ads for any company that's out there who's interested in helping us to push the campaign and to also talk about how their business is using math and science. Because really, as we start trying to think about students changing what majors they are majoring in, we do need to push students to do more math and science majors when they are in college and not necessarily general business. And so we know that if we can get businesses to start talking to the community and to parents about this, we can start seeing an increase in students taking math and science and majoring in math and science. At Home Depot, we're working to build a stronger Georgia. At Emory Healthcare, we know what it takes to make Georgia smarter, and I should say, and healthier. But these are just some of the ideas that we know we can allow us to get the campaign going. And I'm going to try my best one more time to do the commercials. Yes, I'm sorry. We're getting an outside audio feed instead of the feed here. Okay. And again, if you are interested in helping us in terms of sponsorship, community partnerships, we're actually starting in the fall going to do math and science family nights in the different PRISM schools so that we can make sure we really get parents interested in understanding about math and science and the fact that it's not as intimidating as it can appear and that they can find places and get resources for their children. We are also interested in trying to make sure schools really encourage children to do well in math and science, and then we are looking to do some corporate partnerships so that schools can partner with businesses to either do the math and science nights, recognize students who are doing well, recognize teachers who are excelling in math and science and helping their students to really excel in math and science, and then also look at majoring either scholarships or allowing students to do summer programs in math and science. So that's really all we have for now, and please check out the website, give us a call, and I'm interested. I can come out and do any information with parents or student groups to talk about the importance of math and science. And I think that, Susan, this is a wonderful tie-in for us in terms of trying to make this local.
All right, please thank our guest again. In the name of time, we're going to open up the floor for your questions of our guest. Ann?
Go ahead. One of our PRISM strategies focuses intently on increasing the quantity and diversity of math and science teachers. And one example I'm going to give you, because it will sound a little strange at first, and that's why I've chosen that example. If you look across the country at national statistics, about 50% of the students who go to college thinking they want to major in math or science, they take the introductory courses and they change their major. Now, those are national data. You could say, well, part of the problem is that students aren't prepared, and that is true. And Eloise spoke to all the things George is doing to work on the preparation side. But another part of the problem is the way those introductory courses are taught. And so one of the big pushes in this PRISM initiative is working on, you might call it professional development for higher education faculty in terms of changing how they teach to make it more hands-on, more engaging, more inquiry-based, so that when students come into those courses, they are excited about it and they want to go on and major in one of those fields.
Any other questions?
I just had two thoughts when you were talking about the campaign. I think it can be very exciting. I think you're absolutely right that parents are intimidated because if I didn't do well in math, how am I going to help my child at home or with science? I think that it's important, and you may already be doing this, to tap into those counselors in high school, educate them, provide them with those posters so they can excite the students. And the other thought I had was, sorry, I had to write it down. Many students will go home and say, I love algebra. Well, what are you going to do with an algebra degree from their parents? I think the students need to be armed with that knowledge too. So part of your campaign, I would hope eventually you might include what good is an algebra degree, or what good is a math degree, or what good is a science degree. People think it has to be tied to business or tied to education or tied to medicine. So I think that expanding the knowledge base about what you can do with those individual degrees, and I love the idea of having the corporate executives talk about how they use math, how they use science, why it's important in individual companies. So I just wanted to... Great campaign. So excited about it.
Testing. Name is Jose Perez. I'm the State Board of Education. This is a question to Ms. Strayman, if I may. I know the better minds than mine have been working on this issue. I just have one question that is kind of an and question. Completely endorse the science and the math, and we need to do much better at that. I'm also leery of everyone lining up behind that and only looking at that from the perspective of, if I can do a sports analogy, if I'm fighting or if I'm planning a game against a very large and very big football team and my team is small and nimble, my game needs to be small and nimble, not big. So if we compete to graduate as many engineers and scientists as India and China, I'm not sure we'll ever win that particular game. We need to continue to be nimble as we are in this great nation of ours. How much thought has been given to entrepreneurship? Because, for example, here in Georgia, the Terry College does a phenomenal job at their MBA program, and they have leadership coming and speaking to kids, to young men and women at that level. But how can we take that back into as far as high school and encourage that spark, that kid that now works his way back and forth in this flat world of ours on the internet and is already selling things on eBay every day as a part-time job? How can we encourage that as opposed to necessarily saying what worked for us through our own prism, forgive the pun, use these glasses, do as I did when the world is indeed flat and very different from when I was a kid?
A couple of responses. I worry also about the American tendency to zero in on a particular fad. And so, for a while, everything was literacy. and for a while everything was school to work. And there's a danger that math and science could become that. However, I think there are a couple of things we need to do. First of all, one of the problems with science and math comes back to a cultural belief in the U.S. that's different from elsewhere in the world, and that is there's a belief here that math, in particular, is something you're either good at or not good at. It's a gene that you're born with, as opposed to something in math and science that has to do with effort. So it's very important that young people understand that if you put the effort in, you can excel in these subjects. They understand if they're going out for wrestling or basketball or any sport that, sure, maybe there are one or two kids who are just natural athletes, but most people have to work hard and practice to get good. So it's very important that they not shy away from things that they perceive as hard. The second thing is, in response to your question, American entrepreneurship is envied across the world. And we need to help more of our young people especially in minority communities, take part in that American dream. But you need to know something to be entrepreneurial about. There aren't shortcuts. And the best foundation for young people, whatever they're going to become, there's a statistic in looking at what's the most common degree of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Any guesses? The most common undergraduate degree. You said law, liberal arts. Engineering is the most common degree. So clearly these are people who went on, they may have gone on and gotten an MBA or another degree. So I think we just want to make sure they all have the foundation, and then we can supplement it.
This has been very enjoyable as an educator, but my question has something to do with the gender gap that we're experiencing. If you go back to Times Magazine's article last week, I'm most concerned because I have a grandson, and what's happening with our male students, especially in math and science, and their eagerness. I can only say in shopping, every child I saw, the books and the games were left alone, but all of the electronics were cleared off the shelves. My thinking is that in terms of looking at quality education, what are we doing to explore using more technology in some of the gaps in finding quality teachers, because they are learning through the technical games that they're playing. I don't think that there's a child who doesn't have some Game Boy, some Game Girl, hopefully, but Game Boy, or these new little PCs or whatever they're called that they're riding around in the cars and we're not using them. It's all mathematically designed. How do we get them to understand, and how do we use this strategy to educate our children? And math and science has been that area, but today we're far, far away.
This year is really interesting. We agree. I mean, from an IBM view, you all know that this is probably literally our number one issue. And going around the country, one of the things this year we did with the Boys and Girls Club of America was we were working with the curriculums across the country. Hello. No, but we use, with Chris Kloss, as many of you know, is a graduate of Georgia Tech, and his amazing gaming process, that we are working in about 10 cities across the country to use gaming as a tool in the Girls and Boys Clubs for their aftercare programs to enhance their math science skills. And then we'll be taking whatever we're learning from that into the curriculum world based on education. Because I have to confess that sometimes this did not seem as appealing to the educators as it did to the Girls and Boys Clubs. So we took the willing audience, which was the Girls and Boys Clubs, to develop the package. So I think you're right on, spot on. We know what the kids like.
Hi,
I'm Jean Gowan. I represent Child Care, which we know is the first out-of-home learning site for a great number of Georgia's children. And we also know that a number of children arrive in kindergarten and indeed in pre-K behind other children. And yet Child Care is the least funded, the least supported of all of our educational programs. And my question is, and I have to say, right now my little 3-year-old grandson is staying with me, and scientific inquiry, I'm sure, starts at age 3 when every other word is why. And this is an age at which we really need to start motivating them to and building on their natural curiosity and creating that love of learning that can begin. So my question is, from the panel, have any of you addressed this issue of what we can do to support child care providers and teachers, and indeed they are teachers whether they are intentional about it or not, to really help prepare these children?
The focus, one thing we're working on is we have a big consortium where we're working on some new teacher preparation programs for teachers of children birth to age 5. And certainly the kind of inquiry-based approach that you're talking about is very heavily emphasized in those programs.
Plus number 8 on their top 10 is early learning matters most.
Actually, unfortunately, that's going to have to be our last question. I'm going to turn the floor back over. All right. We're going to run the thank you commercial really quickly because we got the sound, and it really is a powerful campaign.
If you make me take math and science, I may not thank you.
I'll be able to do a better job.
I'll be more likely to go to college. I may complain a lot.
If you make me take math and science,
I'll have more opportunities. I'll make smarter choices. I'll be able to take care of myself. If you make me take math and science, I may not thank you now, but one day, I will.
Math plus science equals success. To help your kids succeed, look for the free parent guide at mathsciencesuccess.org.
Again, I want to thank our panelists. It doesn't surprise me that we ran out of time before we ran out of questions and comments. Obviously, this is an issue, and Susan, we especially thank you for framing it so well for us. That's incredibly important, and I can tell you as a member of the business community, one of the things that continues to frighten us most is where will we continue to get the intellectual capital that creates the ideas that continues to allow us to be competitively successful and differentiate ourselves competitively nowadays, more importantly, against the rest of the world, but certainly here in the Southeast as we compete with the rest of the nation. So, again, I want to thank our panelists. Great job. And Susan, I'm with you. I'm optimistic that we're finally starting to get our hands around the importance of this issue, and it's one that I think will continue to get a lot of attention across the state.